Hi, my name is Gary Javitch. I was born in Cleveland, Ohio on December 22nd, 1946. Premature birth, a twin, and my mom had some complications. In fact, when I was just a baby, I had to have an emergency hernia operation, which almost cost me my life at 6 weeks of age. We grew up in a loving family. Our parents, my father, Bob Javitch, was an orphan. He lost his father before the age of 5. He was placed in an orphanage. His mother was alive at the time. She died a little bit later, but she was sickly and she couldn't take care of him. He was one of 7 brothers and sisters. There's only one person left in the family, in his family now, my 94-year-old Ann Frances Smith, who still resides in the Cleveland area. He met my mom, Mildred Cook Javitch, or Mildred Cook, in Brooklyn, New York. And they had 4 children. My brother, who obviously same age, my twin brother, an older sister, 5 years older, Ruth, and a younger brother who my father used to refer to as his golden age dividend, because he was born when my father was in quite middle age. So my brother's 10 years younger. Neither of my parents is alive. But jumping back to childhood, I think probably because my parents grew up probably in very, very modest circumstance. They were very frugal. They were very strict, especially as we were growing up. But they were very, very loving. And I think part of the problem with there being authoritarian parents was my father grew up in an orphanage, as I mentioned. He really didn't have any father or mother to teach him. But he was a very dedicated family man. He was very active in the orphanage, in the Jewish orphan home, which, by the way, was the very first orphanage founded by B'nai B'rith in Cleveland, Ohio, the Jewish orphan home, later known as Belfair, and now it's similar to Girls and Boys Town. It's a treatment center. But he grew up there, had a love for that organization, attended almost every single reunion after he left. And even when he moved to Florida, he helped establish a chapter in Florida of Belfair graduates or alumni. My mother had 3 siblings, one of whom died at a very young age. There was Greta and Nat and Anna, who died at a young age. Her father was a caterer. I didn't get to know them very well either, because by the time I was 10 years old, both Jenny and Sam Cook in Brooklyn, New York, had passed on. And with that, a little bit of Jewish tradition, because my mother kept kosher all the time that they were alive. But when they passed on, she no longer kept kosher. She was my mother in stature. It was very interesting. She was just under 5 feet. She was a vibrant personality, and I think I got my personality from her. My twin brother, I think, has my father's personality. He was 6 foot tall. He's a very smart man. He grew up during the Depression era and never really, he grew up kind of timid. He liked a secure environment, and he never graduated high school. He was, I think, because of the Depression, forced to leave. He got a job with the post office, which he had for over 35, very, very steady, dedicated guy. He grew up very conservatively, and as a result, when I was younger, I was very conservative. When I went away to college, became very liberal. And as I've gotten older, come full circle, more conservative on the economic and foreign policy issues, but I'm a social liberal like many of the people I know. Growing up was difficult. We did not have a lot of money. I had a semi-close relationship with my twin brother because it would have been closer, except we were very competitive. And in school, I did a whole lot better than he did when we were together. As twins in third grade, they finally separated us, and he did better than I did, probably because he was more motivated. We were both in high school very popular. We competed with one another. My brother, as I recall in high school, was president of the student council. I was president of the junior class. We had tons of friends. We knew a lot of people. We did a lot of things. High school was great. And I think partly it was great for both of us because it was kind of an escape from the house. While my parents were very loving, they were also very strict. And years later, some of their strictness I reflected upon and I said, my God, why didn't I see or understand what they were doing? As an example, we both had, my brother and I had paper routes, which we had from the age of 13, and my parents made us go to bed at 9:30 every night. I'm 17, 18 years old. I'm going to bed at 9:30, and not happily. But I can tell you, as I reflected years later, when I was in college, and I went to bed whenever I wanted, and when I went to school, I remember falling asleep in class. I would kid my kids, because I know they stayed up too late often. I would write notes and then they would trail off, and I could look at my notes later and see squiggly lines where my note should have been. Well, that was one of the things, for example, making us go to bed early. I once got involved selling encyclopedias as a young kid. My father was saying, it's a gimmick, don't you see what they're doing? Because the gimmick that they were using, which I didn't see at the time, was we would go into people's homes and we would give them a set of encyclopedias, free. What we sold them was the yearbook service to keep it up to date, because who would want to have an expensive encyclopedia set and not have it kept up to date? My father said, don't you realize that's the gimmick, you're selling it? Oh, no, Dad, I'm giving it away. My father's wise advice. My father, dedicated family man, always had food on the table, always had clothes to wear. We were not that sharply dressed, but it didn't keep us from becoming popular in school. And we went to a high school, Cleveland Heights University Heights High School, our dear alma mater, which had a diverse range from people in our financial circumstance to people who were very wealthy. We got along with everybody, and by being elected to office, we were both elected commencement speakers. It demonstrated if you're, I guess, nice or whatever, interested in other people, then you'll be successful whether you have money or don't have money. And in a way, some people thought we were rich or had a lot of money when actually we didn't, but because we each had a paper route, we were able to spend money. We gave a nice donation to charity when they had the United Way drives. We were able to go places and do things. So we, relatively speaking, had a fun life in school. Home was kind of, as we got older and our parents felt they were losing control, they were even more strict. And so eating at the dinner table, I was a poor eater, always got pushed. Eat, you know, there were people starving in Europe. It was that refrain, and my parents knew people who had survived the Holocaust. I had friends who I knew who were children of Holocaust survivors, and I remember this one family, the Steinfelds, they changed their name to Stan. The mother and father, the father died, and I think the mother committed suicide, or vice versa. That was when I think I first saw the numbers on people's arms, or wherever the tattooed numbers were. That was an important background factor, I think, in my love of Judaism, that we were a minority, that we were persecuted, that we were also special. And I always felt special being Jewish. In our high school, on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, they put out a present list because there were so many kids absent to be at the Jewish holidays. It was fun growing up and going to Cleveland Heights High School. I got a lot of attention. My mother, who I haven't really touched upon at this point, was really an interesting character. She had a part-time job to help out at the Jewish Community Center of Cleveland. She was so popular. My father was quiet. She was vibrant and outgoing. But funny thing, that she and my father, although I know they were loving, and if we were sick, God, did we get great care, but I guess because they felt out of control with us, they felt the need to be strict. My younger brother, born 10 years after we were, grew up. They were in totally a different era, and he was a little bit of a problem. I had just attended his 50th birthday party. I did a little roast of him, and I recall when he was growing up, he shaved his head. I think my parents went crazy. Came home one day bald. And my father, by the way, gave us haircuts. So it wasn't a good clip job, so he finished the job for him. I just found out after all these years. Of course, I was out of the house by the time my brother Joel was active and goofing off and getting into trouble. Anyway, Joel was a little bit of a problem. He wasn't as academic oriented as we were. And my brother was much more academically oriented than I was. In high school, I got a couple A's, but in history, B's and C's generally. In college, I did a lot better. In graduate school, I did extremely well. Maturity. Old too soon, smart too late. Oh well. Anyway, my younger brother did have some difficulties, only went through college, the first year of college, didn't graduate. And he has been a salesman all his life. He's done very nicely. He's done a lot of things. I have to admire him because he did it more independently than I did. My brother and I were more successful. My brother went on to get 4 degrees from Ohio State University, ending up with a PhD in psychology, a bachelor in psychology, a bachelor's in French, and a master's in psychology. My sister attended college for a year. She moved to New York, lived with my mother's sister, Greta, who, to her, jumping and deviating for a minute, Aunt Greta was the sweetest, the exact opposite in terms of my mother. While many times it seemed like we could do no right with my parents. And this is despite the fact that we were doing well in school, achieving popularity and whatever. With my aunt, my sister never did anything wrong. Neither did we. Greta Swiss had no kids of her own. She was married to Irving. Had no kids of their own, and they just thought we walked the earth on a cloud or traveled the earth on a cloud. They were just so loving. They were not that well off, but every birthday, without fail, I got a $5 bill in a birthday card, my brother and I. And immature, stupid, I never responded for many years with thank yous or whatever, but she knew we loved her. and we loved her. She was just great to us. As I got older, I came to appreciate her more. She outlived my mother. She never liked my father's wife. When my mother died, he remarried. She was always jealous that he was happy or whatever. But anyway, she loved us. She doted on us. As I got older, we talked to her more frequently. We gave her, I bought her a treadmill as she got older, which when she died, I saw it in her apartment in Brooklyn. She was just wonderful. And even reflecting, I was very fortunate. My parents set a good marital example. And even though they argued a lot, they were together on lots of issues. So that, in today's day and age, you see parents that don't stick together. They fight all the time. My parents fought all the time, but they stuck together. They had our best interest at heart. And they were, if I was sick, as I mentioned earlier, my mother, a former practical nurse, just gave me the greatest care. It was just absolutely... So I knew deep down that they always loved us. I was a little bit intimidated and afraid of them. They were authoritarian. But I grew up with a lot, even having nothing in some respects. Because I'll tell you, compared to my kids, my childhood growing up was in many ways more enriched than theirs. During the summer, I walked to our local park. We had a playground there. It was Cumberland Park. I played on the softball team every summer. In the morning and in the afternoon, we went swimming. I was a tetherball champion at the park. Just loved playing tetherball. My father taught me how to play tennis. Not too patiently, but I learned. I had a fun life, really fun outside the home. And even when and I'm mentioning some things that weren't good. We went on family vacations. We had lots of fun. One time, I remember our family vacation, we went to Spring Lake Park. I was supposed to watch my little brother who I doted on. He was like 3 or 4 at the time. I remember I lost him in a picnic area. I must have wandered off or something. Anyway, I was so frightened that I lost him. And I searched all through the picnic area, and finally some lady was carrying him. He was crying, and when I saw him, I hugged him, and I was crying. And I thought, oh my gosh, I could have lost my little brother, which leads me to one other story I like to tell my kids. When my little brother was growing up, he was just born. He shared the room that my brother and I had. We lived in a very small 2-family house upstairs. And in that house, we had a small room. There was room for, my brother had a bed, a single bed, and I had a single bed, a little aisle, the dresser, we had a closet, and Joel's crib was on the left wall as I looked outside the room. The favorite story I tell, my brother was a sound sleeper. Joel would cry at night. He was young. I would pick him up, and because I was too tired, I would bring him over and put him in my bed to sleep, except I like to sleep next to the wall, so I put him on the outside. Well, one night, Joel fell out of bed. I started to cry, and I got scared. I jumped out of bed. I picked him up. I'm tapping him on his back, and I'm going to kiss him, and I can't find his head. And it was then that I realized that I'm doing this. He's upside down crying. So I finally got him righted. I gave him a hug and a kiss, and he quieted down, went back to sleep. That was the only time I remember him falling out of bed. When my sister left home, which she did at 18 or 19 probably, he took her room. So anyway, we all doted on Joel. Joel looked up to us and unfortunately had to live up to our image which was really kind of tough for him because he didn't have the same kind of motivation. And being that Joel and my brother David and I did well in school and achieved, office, etc., and were active in all those. Joel was just the opposite. Had a few friends, popular among his friends, was a great guy, a little heavy when he was growing up. And that was partly due to he had to take some pills because my father had tuberculosis. I'll get to that in a second. I'm jumping around, but anyway, Joel had a paper route also. He had a bike. He used to ride it down to his paper route. He lost the bike one day. My mother got really upset. She slapped him. I remember watching, and I was trying to say, Mom, it's not his fault. Somebody stole his bike. She blamed him because he didn't park it in a good place. And knowing Joel, he probably left it out on the street somewhere and someone took it. But anyway, Joel had a tougher life than I did. He survived it fine. He's successful today. All right, back to my parents. And then I'll go on to the college era. My father grew up in the orphanage. He was exposed to someone who had tuberculosis. And many years later, when I was out of the house, he got it. And Joel had to take certain pills to keep him from getting it. And it caused him to gain weight. I didn't, I guess to some degree, one of my regrets of life, I was not as sensitive to other people growing up. Partly because I think my parents were authoritarian, demanding, strict. I was worried about, on reflection, survival. Living through childhood. My parents might have been called abusive in today's day and age, but in that era, that's how people raise their kids. Strictly, toe the line. If somebody in the neighborhood's kid was acting up, you called their parents. They straightened their kid out. My parents, if I misbehaved, they straightened me out. If we went to the school, this teacher at school said, your kids are misbehaving, we caught hell for it. That was the old days. It's a different era now. To some degree better, to some degree worse. I had mentioned my kids didn't have as enriched life as I did. I talked about going to the park, swimming, having lots of friends. My kids, when they were growing up, we were afraid to let them walk down. We lived in Brentwood Road in Regency. We drove them everywhere. We picked them up from school. They didn't walk home. Of course, the school was maybe a little bit too far away, but we drove them everywhere. We wouldn't let them out of our sight. It was the era of John Joubert, child molester, child killer, other weirdos running around. So it was a different era. The kids didn't really have it. Yet our kids, and I'll get to that in quite a few minutes, but they grew up differently. In some ways, I regret that they didn't have what we had. Anyway, jumping back to high school, we were commencement speakers, my brother and I. I went to Ohio University. My brother went to Ohio State. I went to Ohio University because as president of my class, I was invited down there. And I liked it. It was a nice small school, whereas the school that most of the kids at Cleveland Heights High School went to was Ohio State. I wanted to be a little different. I never even thought about applying to other than a state school. I never thought about going elsewhere. It was too expensive. My sites were really limited in scope. In fact, I was very pleased that I was able to earn my way through college. My parents paid for our first year of college. We went to a community college, unlike most of the other kids who went away to school. Probably Ohio State, very few went to Cuyahoga Community College, but they were paying for it and we didn't have that much money. But we did save money for our paper outs. My father wanted me to go to Ohio State with my brother because then I think it was he objected to buying a second typewriter for going away to college. But I wanted to. I was stubborn, and one of the few things I really ever gave in on. And anyway, we went to separate schools. I loved Ohio University. I met a lot of people there, but I was more into myself. While I knew lots of people, enjoyed being friends with lots of people, I was really more into myself, and I was a introverted extrovert, if you could call it that. I didn't have a lot of friends, but I knew a lot of people, and I loved classes. I loved being away, and during the summers, I went away to summer camp. That was something very meaningful for me. Which brings me to a man named Hy Tabachnik. Hy Tabachnik worked at the Cleveland Jewish Community Center. He was a social worker there. He was the program director of Camp Wise. Camp Wise was my first summer job. I got a nice salary for it. I got paid better than most of the counselors because I was a specialist. I was the waterfront director. And I used my swimming ability and my years of experience as a lifeguard to get summer jobs. And before I went away to summer camp, I had been a lifeguard at various apartment pool complexes in Cleveland. I loved it, and I had the chance to go away to summer camp, something I never had the opportunity to do because when we were growing up, we didn't have enough money. So I loved summer camp, being with all the different people. And I remember Bye Bye Birdie was popular my first year of summer camp, which was probably 1966. Graduated from high school in 65. First year summer camp 66. Bye Bye Birdie may have been popular there. One of the counselors felt faint at the beach, so I carried her up from the beach, uphill, all the way back to the cabins. And she taught her kids to sing the song like Conrad Birdie from Bye Bye Birdie. We love you, Conrad. They sang, we love you, Gary. Oh, yes, we do. And when you're not with us, we will be blue. Something like that. Anyway, Hy Tabachnik remembered that we love you, Gary song, and even to this day, and that is 40 plus years later, when I see him, he often tells me about it. Now, I mention Hy Tabachnik because Hy Tabachnik was a man I followed around the country. From Cleveland, he moved to Atlanta to become the director of Camp Barney Meddens through the Atlanta JCC. I became not the waterfront director there, but first I became a unit head there, and then later the waterfront director in the following years. I was 3 years at Camp Barney Meddens. Hy Tabachnik moved to Boston. I moved to Boston. I didn't work for him at all, but my twin brother David was living in Boston. He was teaching school there. Then later Hy moved from Boston to Omaha, Nebraska, where he became the executive director of the new Jewish Community Center. And actually, he came there 1 or 2 years before to help build the center. And I'll pick up with him in just a minute. But I earned my way through college working at Barney Meddens and Camp Wise in Cleveland for 3 years, waterfront director there, then to Barney Meddens, where I worked as aquatics director or waterfront director, and 1 year as a unit head. And that was when Hy also, well, the reason I came to Atlanta was because of Hy. He offered me a job as the new aquatics director at the brand new JCC. At the time, I had been teaching school in Boston. My brother was in Boston, but was away for the year. He speaks fluent French. He was in Belgium for the year. And so I did share a year together with him. I found that it was better being away from my brother than together. We were too much alike. We argued. And that separation over the years has enabled us to be a lot closer than if we were actually living together, which didn't work out that well, but we got along well. It just wasn't as smooth as I would have liked. So anyway, taught school in Atlanta, taught school in Boston, at Newman Junior High in Needham, Massachusetts. I remember one of the hallmarks of my career there. I met a really nice teacher, Larry Kinsman, who taught me a lot about teaching. And we put on together, I taught history, we put on a convention, a political convention. I had gone through one in college, and we did a first. I persuaded the principal to let Larry and me take a day trip inside the school. As a prelude to the convention, we taught the kids a little bit about parliamentary procedure. We taught them a little bit about the candidates running. We had all the history classes represent a state of the Union. And there may have been 6 or 7 history classes. So each class represented a state. We worked with the other teachers. They taught them all parliamentary procedure. So on the day that we were to have the convention, we had it organized, and we invited Michael Dukakis, who had run for, it was before he was still governor of Massachusetts at the time. He was our keynote speaker. So we had the governor of the state come speak to the kids, and he was really great. The kids didn't appreciate it. They were 9th graders. But it was a great experience. The kids just loved it because they were able to pick a candidate, and I recall Senator McGovern being voted the nominee of the Democratic Party. It was a Democratic convention. Massachusetts being a Democratic state, we chose that. So it was really fascinating. One of the hallmarks of my teaching in Atlanta, in the Boston area, one of the hallmarks which got me my job in the Boston area, one of the hallmarks of my teaching in Atlanta, I introduced the subject in a sociology class I taught, Crisis in Black and White, the book by Charles Silberman. It was an honors class, and I taught them a little bit about race relations. It was fascinating when it was in DeKalb County Schools. DeKalb County Schools was the first school system in Atlanta to integrate, and it went fairly well. So the fact, though, that I taught as part of the sociology class, Crisis in Black and White from the book, and which was outside the curriculum, I was lucky I didn't get fired for teaching that, because it wasn't in the curriculum, but I did it anyway when I was looking to apply for a job in the Boston area. They said, wow, you taught that, and they offered me a job. Anyway, from Boston to Omaha to become the very first aquatics director, I helped open up the brand new building, and I remember the Jewish Community Center opening up late because there was a strike. The building was delayed. The pool was delayed. I remember making arrangements with Boys Town at the time to let me teach summer classes. So I taught a life-saving class at Girls in Boys Town. I taught a water safety instructor class at Boys Town and at the J when it finally opened. But God, they were so nice to us at Boys Town. I introduced a lot of classes at the new Jewish Community Center, even a scuba diving class. We were able to team up with a local scuba diving outfit, and we brought to the Jewish Community Center the first scuba diving class, and we had a wide variety of classes, some of which I had incorporated from my experience working at the Cleveland Jewish Community Center as a lifeguard. And that was how I got started in the Omaha area. And that's another interesting story, and I'll share it with you in just a minute. Well, I'd like to continue where I left off by talking about my role at the JCC and my coming to Omaha. And that has been a very significant part of my life. It was, I think, June 23rd when I arrived in Omaha. June 23rd, 1973. I left Boston. I resigned a couple weeks early for my teaching contract. I was really, as I think about that, in Fat City at the time, because not only was I getting residuals from my the year salary, which was prorated over a 12-month period, so I would have been paid over the summer. I also was working at the Esther K. Newman camp, which was one of the reasons I was hired to be the program director. Anyway, I started as the program director at the camp, and then to open up the new JCC as the aquatics director. And as I reflect back, you always want to say, I could have done it a little bit better. And for me, that was true. I think I could have done it a little bit better. I thought I was mature, brilliant, unable to make a mistake, but I made quite a few. Anyway, I'm at the JCC. Great summer, my first summer. I learned a lot. I developed some good friendships. I made a few mistakes as the program director, but they weren't irretrievable or irreparable. And so it was a good year. Unfortunately, Esther K. Newman did not survive more than a couple years. It just was unable to get a good enough Jewish population to continue. And that was my first year at the camp. I was with Bob Litvak, who was the camp director, hardworking guy, very creative. He's unfortunately unable to sustain the Jewish population, and the camp, I think, always ran at a deficit. So they eventually ended it like within, I don't know how many years. It could have been 4 or 5, 3, 4. My memory doesn't go back that far clearly. Anyway, at the Jewish Community Center, I really had a blast. I loved being, well, first off, it was partly teaching, partly administrative. I enjoyed meeting lots of people, and I learned the names of lots of people. Probably helped me because I knew more people than a lot of people who were lifelong Omahans. One thing I did learn, and I think all of you who are listening to this will enjoy my noting, is that I learned that you can't talk about anybody in this town because everybody is related to everybody else. And if you say something bad, God, it just gets around. So I learned, that was one thing I did learn well. I started out and I had some fascinating experiences. I started the very first CPR program in Omaha. I had learned CPR in Cleveland actually at Case Western Reserve University under the auspices of the guy who actually started closed chest heart massage, Dr. Claude S. Beck. And I remember in his training, he gave a dog, a big dog, a heart attack, and we pressed on the dog's chest to demonstrate the heart pumping technique, and the dog had some type of oxygen mask on his face. Couldn't imagine giving a dog mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, but I've heard since people have done that. Their beloved pet. Anyway, the dog, I will tell you, the dog was brought back to life. Dr. Beck shocked the dog to restart its heart, and the dog lived. We learned about heart massage with Chuck Arnold, who was my very first boss, Uncle Chuck. We put, I did actually by myself, under his auspices. The department paid for all the publicity and the selling of tickets, and it was just great. And I remember Mort Greenberg walked into this is at the old Jewish Community Center, because it wasn't built yet when I first came. It was built, it was opened up, I think, in September of '74, somewhere in that area. But I remember Mort Greenberg walking into, he was the Jewish Federation director. Mort Greenberg walked in and he saw a body on the floor in the auditorium. And it was Resusci Annie, the mannequins that were used for the CPR training. And I did the CPR training in conjunction with the Red Cross and the American Heart Association. And so we had all the Resusci Annies. It was a great experience, but it scared the hell out of Mort when he walked in and said, "Oh my God," until he realized what it was. So that was a great experience. I had mentioned the scuba diving. That was a good experience. It was at the JCC. Hi was my mentor, Uncle Chuck, who, by the way, was just a great mentor also. A lot of people did not get along with him, or a few people did not get along with him on the staff, but maybe because I was good buddies with Hi, whatever the reason, Chuck and I got along famously. I was so impressed with his creativity. Chuck was an idea man. He had an idea a minute, and he was an implementer, and he put into practice a lot of his ideas, and I learned a whole lot from him. And when he left the J and went on to the Council Bluffs Senior Citizen Center, I was going to do a program with him. Unfortunately, it didn't work out, but we couldn't get enough people to participate in the program, so it didn't go. But I've maintained a friendship with Chuck, and I think a lot of guys really love Chuck. He'll always be Uncle Chuck in a lot of people's eyes. Great to know him. Another person, speaking of people I met, besides Hi, I met Alan Parso through Bucky Greenberg. Bucky Greenberg was the chairman of the Aquatics Committee, and many of you may know that Bucky is a world-class swimmer and probably one of the greatest swimmers of all time in his age group. As a master swimmer, Bucky, whose family has a history of heart disease, has been vibrant and robust. He took pity on me because I was young and single in the city, and he had me over for dinner quite a few times because I was alone for Rosh Hashanah, for Yom Kippur dinner, and he and Carol, his wife, were just magnificent to me. So, and he was very helpful to me as the aquatics chairman as I started out in my aquatics career at the J. So, just as a sidelight, young, single, at the JCC, meeting lots of people, everybody and his uncle wanted to fix me up, and I went out with a lot of people, and I met some wonderful people. I can't remember Sibby's maiden name, but Sibby Wolfson, I met. She was just really a delight. She ended up marrying Bob Wolfson, but I was in this young adult group, young adult division, YAD. I met more young people, and one of the times I was over Bucky Greenberg's house for dinner, he invited his nephew, Alan Parso, and Carol Simons Parso over, and they said, "God, we should fix you up." And so they suggested two gals, both of whom were cute. One was a young lady named Cindy Novak, and the other was a young lady named Karen Sokoloff. And I decided I would go out with Karen Sokoloff, a blind date. But because there was a blind date, I said, "Alan, you've got to go out with me together." So our first blind date, my date with Karen Sokoloff, Alan and Carol Parso, we went to the rodeo. I'm sure they were bored stiff. I suggested the rodeo because, being from the East, I had never gone to a rodeo. I'd seen them on TV, and it was a lot of fun for me. You like to do a lot of things differently for the first time. I've never done this, so hey, let's do it as long as it's relatively safe. And occasionally, once or twice, I may have done something that wasn't safe. But anyway, I met Karen. We got along really well, and I asked her, after a courtship of about 5 months, I asked her to marry me, and after knowing her 11 months, we got married. Which leads me to another group of people that I met, the Rosinski-Sokoloff family, and what a fascinating family. Phil Sokoloff, after we were married 3 or 4 months, invited me to come into his business. I had such big eyes. I didn't see the pluses and the minuses. I said, wow, coming into a business and the chance to earn more money than at the J, which, by the way, I had enjoyed it. I had 2 good, solid years there. But in February of 1976, I had been married 3 or 4 months. I joined Phil in his business, and it was an 18-year association. And it was really a mixed bag for me. On the one hand, Phil was not a very good teacher, not very patient, a little bit of a curmudgeon. But having said all that, I learned a tremendous amount from him. Phil was probably one of the most astute businessmen you could ever meet. A life master in bridge, a really, really bright man. He had a fantastic memory, and I remember Phil's business, Phillips Manufacturing Company, started in 1955. I joined him in 1976. I met, well, of course, he had mostly non-Jews working for him. Dick Pickert, who had friends among many Jews in the community, who always liked to say, I'm a goy with a Yiddish cup. I'll mention Dick for just a moment because he was important in Phil's life, important in my life. He had worked for Phil's father. Phil's father was Lou Sokoloff. He was married to Rose Jacobson, and they had a very long marriage. Lou was very, very bright, taught Phil about business. Lou was a very, very conservative guy. Phil was conservative also, but much bolder. Lou grew up during the Depression, so was a little bit reluctant to take the bold steps that Phil took when Phil was running Phillips Manufacturing, and but nevertheless, Lou was very, very successful. Phil was growing up. His mother doted on him. His father doted on him. He was extremely bright. Phil Sokoloff was very, very talented man, could sing and dance, and he was dubbed as, growing up, the little boy with the big voice. While he didn't graduate go to college, he did graduate from high school and went on to a 3 or 4 year musical career, which, with a big band in Chicago, was magnificent. Came back after that great career, worked with his father in a liquor store. I know they used to bring in booze illegally. It was that era, but they made a lot of money. Phil's father was in the fruit business and had a store, a fruit stand, and he also had an automotive store. And Dick Pickert worked for Lou in the store. Dick was a very loyal guy, must have ended up working for the Sokoloff family for over 35 years. Phil taught him a lot of Yiddish, and he was an investor in Phil's company. And when he left it, when he was in his late 60s, he had a nice nest egg from having invested with Phil. And Dick was always a very important part of the family. Dick was married to Connie. Dick died a couple of years ago. But back to Phil. Phil and Ruth Sokoloff married in June of 1948, had 2 children, Steve and Karen. Steve, also extremely bright, also had a great memory. Everybody loved Steve. He had lots of friends and had nicknames for lots of friends. I remember Dale Weinstein was Wino, and Arnold Jaffe was Beak, and Karen was Ketsy, and he was friends with his first cousin, once removed, David Jacobson, and a whole bunch of other guys. Some when Steve went away to college, unfortunately, he got involved with drugs, and owing to one of the factors in his poor relationship with his father, he got into Hare Krishna, which, by the way, was 20%, I think, Jewish when the Hare Krishna movement was big. Steve is still a Hare Krishna, but later he and his father mended fences after not speaking for many, many years. And Phil became an important part of his life. Stevie even named his son Philip Morton Sokoloff after Phil, kind of at Phil's insistence, but Phil doted on his grandchild, his grandson, and it was a beneficial relationship. So Steve, and I was very pleased that Steve and his father became closer. Ironically, as Steve and his father became closer, I became more distant. We had difficulties in our relationship. I'll touch on that for just a moment. Back to Phil, though. For his business acumen, Phil was a very philanthropic guy. Deserves a great deal of praise for that. While he may not have been a big donor before I married into the family, after, he was very generous to the Jewish community, and as you all know, Phil got very involved in healthcare-oriented activities with his National Heart Savers, which I'll mention in a few minutes, and ended up donating several $1 million for the fitness center, which is just probably one of the greatest health wellness gym-oriented centers in the Omaha area. And Phil was glad to get involved with that. Phil was married to Ruth Rosinski, and Ruth had 3 brothers, Jerry, Rich, and Sal. Sal was the youngest, Jerry was the middle, Rich was the oldest son, and Ruthie was the oldest child. And they were really a warm-hearted family. In fact, very loving family. Sam Rosinski and Fanny were from the old country, and they both spoke with an accent. They imparted on the kids a loving family relationship. And all the kids used to say, we get our warmth and family-oriented relationships because of our membership because of our family upbringing with Sam and Fanny. Sam only lived to about 50, had a heart problem, had a brief run-in with the law. He was an entrepreneur, some bookkeeping problems, and anyway, he died young in his early 50s, but that heart disease was a factor in Sal Rosinski's death. Sal was a great, funny guy, had the best sense of humor of all in the family. I remember one time hearing the story about Sal, and to tell the story, a quick brief background on Phil. Phil was, since he had his heart attack at age 42, he was very, very health conscious, and Ruth really catered to his food needs and was very careful about giving him food that was very low in cholesterol, which occasionally had a tendency not to be too tasty. So getting back to the Sal story, Ruth and Phil invited Sal over, and Phil and Sal had this very warm, close relationship for many, many years. They were very close, even after Sal moved to Portland, Oregon with his lovely wife and family, Phyllis, Nancy, and Susie. Anyway, Sal was home alone with the Sokoloffs eating dinner, and Ruth served a great spaghetti dinner, but prepared for Phil. And Sal took one taste of it and said to his sister, Ruth, would you mind putting a little cholesterol back into the spaghetti? Anyway, typical of his humor, and of course that doesn't do justice to his great sense of humor and his spontaneity and whatever. Just a great guy. Okay, so I marry into the family. I go into the business. I remember thinking, well, first off, here is a guy who grew up modestly. And I remember when I married, going out to dinner one night with the Sokoloffs, Karen, Phil, Ruth, and me. We had dinner, and the dinner cost $80, so it had to be. It was a special dinner because we normally didn't spend that kind of money on dinner, but the $80-some made me appreciate what was going on in my life, because $80-some was a week's pay for Larry Logren, a beginning worker at our manufacturing plant. And I remember at the time, the first Hanukkah, Phil and Ruth gave us each $3,000. So Phil and Ruth gave me a total of $6 and gave Karen a total of $6 for $12,000. I remember the generosity. Phil and Ruth, very family oriented. I remember their generosity. I had never gotten a gift like that in my entire life. And that was the legal limit at the time, $3,000. I was moved to tears that they had given me that gift and given Karen. And of course, Karen grew up, her father was not always a wealthy guy. He earned his money the hard way. He worked 70, 80 hours a week. And that was another thing I learned from Phil about his working that many hours a week. I had come from Boston. I had come from college, Atlanta. I was a big, devout liberal. I had voted for George McGovern. I thought rich people were evil, or businessmen. You know, I did not have a good picture of business people. So one of the things I really owe to Phil, I looked at Phil and I said, my God, this guy works 70, 80 hours a week. He was in a tax bracket, which at that time went up to 92%. 90. I have mentioned a little bit about Ruth, but I want to dwell upon her a little bit more because she played a very interesting role in Karen's life. She died at the age of 56 in February of 1982, and she was really a very, very strong woman. In many respects, she got cancer at the age of 26, and during the 30-year period that she lived after that, she had probably 15 serious cancer operations. And she was really quite indomitable. A lot of people, having gone through that many surgeries, would have given up. And I wanted to mention her courage in surviving facial disfigurement and fighting the cancer, and she wanted to see her grandchildren, and she was devoted to her grandchildren. She was alive when Jennifer was born, and Jennifer was 4 years old approximately when she died. Well, actually, she was a little past 4, and Mark was just 1 year old at the time that Ruthie died. She just really lived for the grandchildren. She just valued life so much, and people marveled. Her friends marveled at how she had that will to survive. and a lot of courage. She even gave up smoking cold turkey because they told her that maybe it would lengthen her life. So very, very impressive. The family did a lot of things together with Phil's family and Ruth's family. I mentioned the Rosinskis. I didn't mention Sorley and Jerry. Phil's sister, Sorley Sokoloff. God, 6 syllables. 2 names, 6 syllables. She married a Cohn. She breathed a deep sigh of relief. Everybody could pronounce it. Sorley Cohn. It was really very nice. Very loving couple. They're joining us this coming weekend at my daughter Rachel's graduation in Madison, Wisconsin. Phil has been dead now about 2 years. He died April 15th, 2004. So it's coming up. So he has been actually dead about 3 years. And even though there was a lot of competition between Ruth and Phil, between Sorley and Phil, brother and sister, and he was 7 years older, at least Sorley, at least that amount older. They were very loving and caring about each other. Jerry was is a very loving father, and the couple had 3 very nice kids. Susie and Nancy in the Chicago area, Debbie in the Arizona, now living in Arizona with her husband Bruce and their daughter Whitney, and Nancy living with her husband Robert Cohn. Had 2 children. They were Steffi and Allie, and God, the Sokoloff genes, as I mentioned, were really quite strong. Everybody is so smart in the family. Very impressive family. Sorley, I recall very fondly, she talked about being on the show Password. She did well on that. She's very articulate. I mentioned Jerry's a loving husband. Our family and their family would get together on Hanukkahs, and every Hanukkah they would do a movie. Sometimes it got to be a little annoying because the movies went on. We would do it on a Sunday night, and it could be after Hanukkah, but we did it anyway because that would be when everybody could come in. So we'd have the kids come in from college on both sides of the family. Debbie would write a little script, and we would read it, and it would be to some song, and we would she would put in her own words to some famous song, and we would just have a big blast. Everybody participating, and Phil would frequently pop up, jumping in and yell, "Show business is my life," which got to be even more funny because in his earlier years it was his life, and but his popping up and comically doing it, saying that in the course of the family movie was very, very funny, and we used to enjoy looking at the movies years later. I was really the odd man in the family. Of all the people in the Sokoloff, Rosinski, Javitch family, I'm the only one really that can't sing. And I can't dance. Fortunately, I could write. Anyway, so these movies, which would feature everybody singing, when it got to be my lines, I had like a 2-note range. If I could keep it within those 2 notes, I was great, magnificent. I could be a star. But I just could not carry a tune. I still can't. I have poor rhythm. It's amazing I could dive off a diving board. I do somersaults and whatever, but God, dancing and singing, it was not in me. Anyway, we play those movies, and I think Jerry or I started to put together Hanukkah, so I have one that may be 8 or 9 years in a row of 3 to 6 minute Hanukkah family movies. So, and I haven't shown them. It will be a real delight. One evening we'll all get together, and it's on a Super 8 projector. So I still have the projector, and I think it should go fairly well. Very nice memories. I'll mention this in later parts. The things that I'm proud in particular, I will mention B'nai B'rith because I've served as its president of B'nai B'rith since 2000. The kid that I'm maybe the president for life, but Lois Epstein, who has helped me tremendously as the administrative officer, she works 2 days a week there, has really helped me do a lot of things with B'nai B'rith, and the fact that I'm kind of like semi-retired, I had all the time to do it that the regular people who served in office did not have. So I have been fortunate to take B'nai B'rith to some new heights with a couple of great programs, bread breakers, and great speakers. I'll probably mention that again, but I just thought for the moment I would do it now. Omaha I will mention a little bit more later, but what a great transition, having lived in Atlanta, lived in Boston, growing up in Cleveland. Omaha is a place that you can get around in about 20 minutes. And I remember starting out at the downtown JCC, the old one, and the pool, and everybody had stories about the pool. Everybody had stories about that short circular gym that you could run around. I think you had to do 32 laps to get to a mile, whereas the new one, you only have to do 13 laps to get to a mile. Really quite a contrast, quite a difference. Well, one of the things I wanted to mention in a little more detail was this movie. I had a little creativity with regard to some of the family movies. One of the movies I did was at my home in Cleveland. I took Karen back, and I think the kids were little, but we had a Thanksgiving dinner. And my mother made, when she cooked, it was like she was cooking for 1 million people, and there maybe only be 10 or 12. We'd have all the family there, or a number of members of the family, our extended family. One particular Thanksgiving we were in, I decided to really fool around with the movie camera. This is now Super 8 in the old days. So we ate, and I said something to the effect like, you may think that this meal was difficult to put together, but it was as easy to put together as it was to finish it up. And something like that is the format. And when I did that, what I would do was we would take a picture of the table filled with food and leftovers and everybody's dirty plates, and we would take a few second shot of the table. We'd take off a plate, take another few second shot, take off a plate. We would do it till the entire table was completely empty. And it made it so and the whole process took maybe a minute or 2 minutes on the 3-minute roll of film, and it just like disappeared before our very eyes. And I also did something like that with the building of the new addition to Phillips Manufacturing Company. Every week or two, I would take like 10 or 15 seconds or less of the building going up. And over a period of time, I would have segments, and I cut them out of the 3-minute roll, save them, and then I eventually strung them all together so that you could see that an 8-month building project came together in really 2 or 3 minutes. It was magnificent. It was, so a little bit of creativity. This is in the era before we had editing machines and things like that. So I really felt kind of pleased that I was able to tape the film together, get it in the right order, and string it along. And so that leads me up to Phil and Ruth's 30th anniversary, which was a surprise party. And it was a surprise in a lot of different ways. Cousin Bobby Rosinski, who goes on to MIT to get a master's degree, was expert in film. We had him be the photographer, and none of his pictures came out. So, I mean, it was really depressing, especially for Karen, who really loves those sentimental memories, the pictures didn't come out, but we did have the evening showing of this movie, which we called 30 Minutes. And I think in the process of putting together, we took it as a takeoff on 60 Minutes. I was Dan Blather and Karen was Marvelous Safer, and we played the broadcasters. We did a stopwatch and did the film of, we focused on the stopwatch on a red 3x4 piece of cardboard or border poster paper, and we would let it run for 5 or 6 seconds, and then we'd have at the bottom a little sign that said 30 minutes, and I would take a break, and we'll be right back. We did this takeoff on 60 Minutes. It was just hysterical. So we had a picture of Karen as she went through her pregnancy, and I'll dwell on that in a little bit. We also had a biography of Phil and Ruth in this. After all, it was their 30th anniversary, and we featured stories about Phil being the little boy with the big voice. I had pictures. I took individual, on a movie, I took pictures of the pictures. And so we were able to string it together with background music. Karen supplied the background music, did some singing, and we loaded this film with so many different memories. So when we surprised it, surprised the whole family with it, everybody was really flabbergasted. And Phil actually was so overwhelmed that when he was giving tribute speeches to Ruth, he gave more of a tribute to me and to Karen, because the film was so overwhelming, and it really portrayed him in such a positive life. And of course, it portrayed Ruthie in a very positive life as well. But he was so overwhelmed at this 30th party, he forgot to really pay tribute to Ruthie. And Ruthie, who followed his speech, couldn't play off the speech. And so she was at a little bit of a loss. So we made up for it by having a separate session that I added onto the tape a little bit later. So Sal was one surprise, and the movie, which I had edited, cutting, this is funny because it's the old days, Super 8 film, I put in this movie pictures of, I took a picture every, I think, 6 weeks for Karen, like a 10-second clip of Karen pregnant. So you saw her go from thin to bigger, 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 until finally she's 9 months pregnant. And then we had some pictures in the operating room, and Karen put to music "Isn't She Lovely" for on this 30-minute film, which had Stevie Wonder singing "Isn't She Lovely," made from love, and we have the picture of Jennifer being born combined with that, Karen going from thin to fat, family pictures. It was, and this is before videotape, and Karen and I worked hours on this, and I was the editor, and I cut here and cut there, and the day of the party I called in sick because I didn't have it finished, and finally I had it finished, and everybody just loved it. I mean, we were so proud of this movie, and we have it on CD, but what a great movie this was. But anyway, that was their 30th wedding anniversary, and unfortunately, Ruthie passed away, and but it was Phil's inspiration. He wanted to do something to make the world safer. He thought about getting cholesterol testing machines, which is what he started with. Well, before he was thinking about getting defibrillators and putting a defibrillator on fire trucks around the nation. But and they were expensive, but some type of new invention came, and it made it not worthwhile. I think it would not be that great a deal to do it. So he elected instead to do cholesterol testing. He was the first person with his National Heart Savers Association Phil was to put to test an entire city for what their cholesterol level, and then demonstrate by doing a follow-up years later that people who found out what their cholesterol level was would do something about it. He ended up testing people on Capitol Hill, in other cities around the country, and then started this ad campaign to make the world safer for cholesterol. You may remember Phil's program about attacking Kellogg's, their Poisoning of America series, and then attacking McDonald's. You've got too much fat, you're killing us. Very successful. I was proud to be a part of that. I was on the board of National Heart Savers when he left Phillips Manufacturing Company and sold it. I didn't play that big a role because I didn't want to continue working with Phil. I wanted to do something on my own. Anyway, Ruthie was the inspiration for that. Phil devoted, I think he said he spent about $15 million approximately on making Heart Savers great. He was instrumental in getting a law passed. And he was named an honorary co-sponsor of the bill that in the early 90s was instrumental. It was in George H.W. Bush's administration to get labels on all the packages. So you see that all these labels on any food packages that list fats, carbohydrates, proteins, and the total calories, that's because of Phil. Instrumental in getting that law passed. George Bush signed it. Phil became world famous and did his campaign. Unfortunately, the latter part of his life, I became a little bit more independent. It created a few more problems in our relationship. At his death, we were estranged, but I was there with Karen, helping her handle her father's death. So I mentioned a lot on Phil, a little bit on Ruthie. Let's talk about Karen, who was a great mother to our kids. We have Jennifer, who was born in 1978, Mark, who was born in 1980, and Rachel, who was born in 1984. I have, knock on wood, I have been gifted in life. I have 3 of the most wonderful children. They're all smart. They're all good looking. They inherited great genes. They have Calvin Klein. I have Levi, but anyway, they have great genes. And their mother, talk about giving good early childhood education. We were fortunate because of Phil's generosity and my working at Phillips Manufacturing Company. Karen did not have to work outside the home. She worked full-time as a mother. She read to them. She took them places. She did things with them. The kids are personable. They're hardworking. They're school-oriented. They're giving-oriented. They're all charitable-minded, Jennifer in particular. And Phil has made it possible for them to be able to give to charities all over the United States and the world. Karen is musically talented. She discovered this talent when, as our kids were getting older in school full-time, Jim Conant, who worked at the JCC, he was a attendance instructor, asked her if she would help him create some music for his musical. And Karen created, the play was Love at the Cafe. She enhanced it to the good, with 10 or 12 songs at least. And it gave it such a life that she won a writing award for the music, a composing award, and the play won an award. And she went on to do several other plays that also won awards, From Generation to Generation, a Jewish-themed Fiddler on the Roof type play. But it was a great story. It played at the Jewish Community Center in Omaha, played at the Jewish Community Center in St. Louis, played at the Jewish Community Center at Temple Emmanuel in Beverly Hills, which coincidentally was Steven Spielberg's synagogue, although I don't think he got a chance to see it. She also did a couple plays, Surprise. She's done CDs that accompanied every one of these plays. It's been a great joy for her. Karen also, as energetic as she was, when the kids were born, when Jennifer was born, she wanted some reading material to, become a better mother. What can she do to become a better mother? There wasn't that much out there. So she decided that she would write a book about it. So she worked with Mark Goldstrom, who has a laundry diaper service, and she passed out questionnaires through his diaper service that went around Nebraska and maybe Kansas, Iowa, where he also had his diaper service. And she sent out a questionnaire, and people wrote anecdotes about little tips, and she wrote a book. Now, she did not do the book by herself. She asked Amy Kassman, the daughter of Fritz and Marlene Kassman. Amy Kassman, who married Sandy Friedman, so Amy Kassman Friedman, to help her write the book. Amy was a Northwestern University graduate, very talented writer, and really had the knack for turning a phrase. So between the two of them, under Karen's leadership, they wrote a book called Mother Knows Best: How to Live Through Your Child's First 4 Years. And Karen wrote and wrote and wrote, looked all over, finally found a publisher, Liberty Publishing Company, that published her book, and it went 2 printings. We're really pleased. It went, and today the book is still being sold at Amazon.com. It's out of date, out of print. It was published, I think, in 1982, but that book is still being sold. Karen went from the book to the music, and one of her plays, Princess Diana the Musical, was produced at the Joslin, got all of her plays got standing ovations. Anyway, the Princess Diana the Musical got standing ovation. She's modified it several times. It's now published in a catalog in London. And I'm proud to note that in the fall sometime, a German company, a German play company, has translated the play, and they're going to produce it in Germany sometime fall, winter. And you can look it up on, if you Google the title in German, let's see, Princess Diana, I think it's Das Princess. But anyway, it's on. Karen has sold lots of CDs. She's gotten a lot of recognition for her plays, which is great because she's so talented. Karen is a lovely, lovely person. We had a great marriage. We were married 28 years in the end. We unfortunately got divorced primarily because of the pressure from her father. As I said, we were somewhat estranged. Needless to say, it was a very sad moment in my life. Karen is a lovely person. We get along very well. We do lots of things with the family. I'm fortunate that divorce was so amicable. I come over on the holidays because the whole families get together. She still comes to our family activities in Cleveland. I still go to family activities here. So it's a crazy kind of divorce, but it's a divorce. Anyway, she is a wonderful person. So now I guess back to, I'll touch on the kids. I'll finish up with me, and this long video will be over. So the kids all did well in school, as I mentioned. Jennifer was our first high school graduate. I just got so emotional. I cried when she went away to school. My very first one. She's graduated from Washington University with honors, and she worked a lot of years at Herzl Summer Camp. I think 15 summers altogether, she was there as both a camper and a staff member, leaving them as the assistant director, moving over to Temple Israel in Minneapolis, and by the way, Herzl was from the Minneapolis JCC. So she moved over to Temple Israel in Minneapolis to become a day camp director. This is her last summer there. She's done it 3 years. She will go back to graduate school in the field of social work. My son, Mark, also did very well in high school, graduated second in his class. A little bit of a prankster, I'm sorry to say. May have been responsible for Westside High School being forced to empty their pool around swim meet championship time because the water turned blue. A few other pranks I won't go into, but graduated second in his class, even though he figured out a way in Spanish how to get the highest F he had to get to still get an A in that class, which he did. Anyway, he went to the University of Pennsylvania, the Wharton School, graduated with a 3-point-something average, and went to Wall Street as a consultant at Huron Consulting. Didn't like it, came back to Omaha, and I'm really pleased. We opened up a business together, and Mark has since taken it over completely. It's called Action Inkjet, and he is selling to businesses. I remember when we were in it together, and one of the competitors, Island Inkjet at the Westroads, said, when they found out that we were going to compete with them, you guys will never make it. That was 2.5 years ago. I don't know how he's doing, but we're doing just fine. Mark's doing terrifically, and he's also bought some commercial property, so he's doing nicely. Our youngest, Rachel, is 23 in a few weeks. She is going to graduate from University of Wisconsin in elementary education, although she's not going to leave. Even though she's going to walk down the aisle, she's going to stay on and get a second major and will be fluent in Spanish. And then she said since she'll be graduating in December, she might go to Peru or someplace to teach and further improve her Spanish. So we're looking forward to that in just a few, actually this coming Friday, we're going up there. So this is May 14th, 2007. Now back to me. Okay, so while I was married, I was working at Phillips Manufacturing Company. It gave me an opportunity to get involved philanthropically also. The first person to solicit me was Mort Greenberg, and I remember in the old JCC, Mort comes up to me and he says, you know, you're working for the Jewish Community Center, you're the aquatics director, it's time you made a contribution. Now, prior to that, I think the biggest donation I had ever given the Jewish Federation in whatever city it was in was like $5. Mort squeezed me, bent my arm behind my back, and guiltily got me up to $100. And from that time on, I have steadily advanced. I'm proud to say, from way back when, nobody has to bend my elbow or put it behind my back. I proudly give to the Jewish Federation of Omaha. I'm a pace setter, and that is the perfect springboard for my pride in being a member of the Omaha Jewish community. I came here, it'll be 34 years this June. I started at the JCC, went on to Phillips Manufacturing Company, left, went to graduate school, started working healthcare, helped Karen produce a couple of her plays. Now I'm doing some freelance work in writing. I'm fortunate that I invested well enough that I can work part-time. I work for my brother, who is a PhD, teaches at Harvard and at BU. He wrote a book. I edited that book. I discovered I had some writing talent in the 90s, the year of discovery. I went to graduate school, got a master's in healthcare administration, had to do a few papers, realized, God, I really enjoy writing. I started doing some occasional articles for the Jewish Press. I continue to write for the Jewish Press. I have been nominated for a couple of awards. I'm very fortunate. Carol Katzman, the current editor, Morris Moline, the editor earlier, liked the stuff that I did, and I owe them a debt of gratitude. I've gotten to interview some interesting people. Robert Rubin, Secretary of the Treasury, Tom Friedman. I got to take pictures of Alan Greenspan, the Federal Reserve Board chairman. When he was Federal Reserve Board, he came to Omaha to speak, although he wouldn't let me do a personal interview. He didn't do interviews. I've gotten to interview a lot of wonderful people and wrote, I think, some articles that I hope I was able to bring to life the personalities of the people I wrote about. Recently, I wrote about an Egyptian Jewish lady who, Hélène, it's Helene, but pronounced in French because her father was French, Hélène Weber, Hélène Avigdor Weber. Carol Casson nominated that article for an award. Her family was forced out of Egypt in 1962. She came to America in 1963. She was part of the silent exodus that left all the Middle Eastern countries during the period from 1947 to 1967, when Israel became a state and is a state. The other Arab countries threw them out. Now, you don't hear about the silent exodus because all the publicity goes to the Palestinians, who are never absorbed. A lot of them are still in refugee camps now because the other Arab nations use them as pawns to promote hatred. These Hélène Avigdor Weber, her family was absorbed by America, and a lot of her family went to Israel. Israel absorbed the grand majority of them, and so did countries around the world, South America, France, England, whatever, but you don't hear about them because they got absorbed. But anyway, her story is poignant. Had to start over from scratch. Her father was well-to-do but not wealthy in Egypt, and started from scratch in America, and it was hard. But anyway, I've written for the Jewish press. I've written an occasional op-ed piece in the Omaha World Herald on Middle East issues. I feel proud about that. I feel like I've given some voice to people in the Jewish community with a voice saying, look, this is the Jewish community. This is what Israel represents. And when the Hezbollah war came about, the Second Lebanon War, or as I call it, the Mullah's War of Terror against Israel, I got an article in the paper saying that the response Israel gave was not disproportionate. Anyway, the writing has been a very wonderful creative outlet for me. I've enjoyed doing that. I have enjoyed editing the book that my brother wrote, and editing some of his articles. My other part-time job is I do part-time work at the University of Nebraska Medical Center. I have fake illnesses that they have given me complete with script, 3 and 4, occasionally 5 or 6 page scripts. I memorize the script. I go in to either the classroom for the first and second year medical students, or in the clinic in a testing situation, and we present an illness to the students. The student has 15 minutes to figure it out, ask me the right questions. I grade them on, did they ask the right history? Did they do the right questions for the history? Did they have a good interview structure? Did they do the right examining? Did they check my heart or my hearing or whatever? I always like to say, over the course of the last 11 years that I've been doing this, I've had a perforated bowel. I've had a heart attack. I've had carpal tunnel syndrome. I've had schizophrenia. I've had bad legs. I have had, for 11 years, every Tuesday, once a month, costochondritis. So if you're a medical student, don't repeat that. It's not supposed to go out. Anyway, I've had that. And in between all that, I do volunteer work for APAC, ADL, and B'nai B'rith. And B'nai B'rith, I served as Midwest Regional President, and I've been the president of Modsky Lodge for 7 years. I have, for ADL, sat on the board. I've gone to a number of their national conferences. For APAC, I am a member of the council. Those Jewish things, which bring me full circle, help me be a very proud member of this Omaha Jewish community. As I look out, I got my start here in 1973 when Javitch brought me in. I have had an opportunity, because I worked at the J, because I've been active in the Jewish community, to meet a lot of people. I just look at, with pride, at seeing the people that come together to make Omaha great. And of course, everyone knows philanthropically, per capita, even though we're a small Jewish community, per capita, we are one of the top 5 givers in the entire Jewish community. But I look around and I see people like Steve Pittler, past president of the Federation, Jan Goldstein, who's the executive director of the Jewish Federation, Marty Ricks, who is just outstanding. These are people I can call friends. These are people I work with. These are people committed to the Omaha Jewish community. And we have people like Ben Nachman, an oral historian, who's helping record this message. And I am leaving out so many people, so I am going to stop. This Omaha Jewish community, individually and as a group, unselfishly and occasionally selfishly, but for the good of the Jewish community, have given of their time and their money to make this place great. I've done work for the rabbis in the community. Mendel Katzman, for example, I do want to mention him because I wrote grants for him, and I've wrote grants for a few other organizations. This community works hard to make a decent life for fellow Jews, and there are some poor people in this community. I was not poor in Omaha, but I know what it's like to have people who can't afford all the extras and the luxuries. And so it's a privilege to give to the Jewish Federation of Omaha for me, because now I can't afford to do it. And it's a privilege to work for the betterment of the Jewish community. I would be a little bit remiss before I end this if I didn't mention one of the organizations that I just touched on, and that's B'nai B'rith, and several of the people that have really helped me make a contribution to the city of Omaha. And that's Al Abramson, Marty Ricks, Steve Rikus, Adam Jacobs, and Gil Cohen. There are others, of course, but those people have really been helpful in many, many ways in making B'nai B'rith a prominent, active organization in Jewish Omaha and in Omaha in general. I've spoken for a long time. I do want to end this thanking Ben, but saying to Jennifer, Mark, Rachel, and Karen how much I love them. I love you. You've been an inspiration in my life, and without your support and help, I could not have achieved what I have. So thank you.